Today is day 3 of a trial taking place in Denver, being watched nationally over whether or not former President Trump will be allowed on the Colorado ballot in next year's presidential primary. 4 Colorado Republicans and 2 unaffiliated voters, along with a liberal group in Washington, D.C., sued to keep Trump off the ballot, saying he disqualified himself by running for office again by violating the 14th Amendment.
He was praising the violence, remember this day forever, because he was in league with the insurrectionists. And we saw what he was saying even years later, that fraud allows suspending all rules, including the Constitution of the United States. That was his mental state on January 6th, and that was his mental state even years later. He has violated his oath. He engaged in insurrection.
Well, we're going to talk about it now with our legal expert, Whitney Trayer, who has spent the last couple of days in Denver District Court. Yes. You've been watching the trial. Bring us up to speed. How has this been progressing from a legal view?
The trial's been fascinating. I mean, as trials go, it's boring in many senses because this is you having to present evidence. And so presenting evidence, laying the foundation, things like that, that's a tedious process. But it's an important process because this is what we've been talking about with regard to was the election stolen and everything else. In courtrooms, the evidence that's being presented is totally different than what's being said out there. So with that being said, today was very tense. Every day has been tense. Being in court is a
lot at stake.
Yeah, it's a lot at stake. And really the plaintiffs have to show that, one, it was an insurrection, what happened on January 6th, and then under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that President Trump, former Trump, that he either engaged in this insurrection or aided them. And so what they've been doing is going through and showing video after video and showing, President Trump where he said things like, there's good people on both sides and I'm going to meet you down there, things like that.
I know they had an expert on a couple of days ago about how his language for years before incited various groups and things like that. But they have a high burden to reach here. So what was your takeaway today from day 3? What were they doing today?
Well, today was really interesting because today they had the chief of staff for the Secretary of Defense. And here he was arguing that President Trump had authorized 10,000 National Guards. But because National Guardsmen, National Guard, and because the mayor of D.C. had not requested them, procedurally they couldn't do it. And honestly, if I were a juror, this is a bench trial, so it's to the judge, as I was watching him, I didn't think that was credible at all. Yeah. Because he was just saying, well, by advice of counsel, they told us that without this request, we couldn't do it. And of course, that request didn't come until the afternoon of January 6th. And he was saying that it takes time to get everybody together under the National Guard. So it's been really interesting, high-level testimony.
So in a criminal trial, the burden of proof belongs to the prosecution, to
right?
Prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. Who's the burden of proof belong to in this case?
Yeah, and here the burden is still on the plaintiff, which is the citizens. So Trump and his team are the defendants. So I think it's a preponderance of the evidence as opposed to like clear and convincing, but it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. So with that said, my buddy Scott Moore called me and he said he watched my presentation this morning where I said, I think they have an uphill battle and I think Trump has the easier argument. And he started citing all the different things about, well, he did this, this, and this. And while those things are true, this is such a big leap. We don't have precedent. So to say, hey, this president, this person caused this insurrection and therefore he's not going to be on the ballot, that's a real extreme thing. And I don't think the experts made the causal link between what Mr. Trump said and what the insurrectionists heard.
But there's time left. Are we in the middle or are we getting to the end of this? This is only supposed to go for 2 more days.
Right. Well, we're probably getting close to the end of the trial, beginning of the appeal process, because whoever wins, I guarantee there will be an appeal to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and then ultimately to the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. So I would suspect the U.S. Supreme Court will hear this. So the judge in this case is trying to get her order done by Thanksgiving so everything can be decided, appeals and everything, by January 4th, which I think is the date that the
So within 3 weeks, we expect
So this is like a scrimmage for the lawyers, right? You know, it's like a scrimmage, and then they
Right.
know they're going to be arguing this again.
Well, it's the game, but they know that there's going to be other games. It's the beginning of the playoffs, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
Well, the
They know
country's
it's
watching,
coming again.
seeing what's happening in
Yeah.
Denver District Court. We appreciate you are there to keep an eye on it for us and tell us what is happening, trying to break it down for us. Whitney Trayer, it's always good to see you. Thanks.